CYPRES How-To. Set activation altitude. The reason for wanting to use the set activation altitude feature is optional and personal. In most cases, jumpers turn on the unit and have it set to 0 arrow down, which is perfectly acceptable if you are landing in the same location you are taking off from. However, if you feel you would like the activation to take place a bit higher than the default setting, you can manually change this in the settings. An example for wanting to make this change could be in the event you are jumping at a DZ that is surrounded by forest. If your jump takes you over the trees, you have to factor in the tree's height impedes on the precious altitude you would want during a CYPRES activation. If the surrounding trees are about 100 feet tall, you can add 100 extra feet to your activation altitude to give your reserve just a little extra time to inflate. Of course, there is no guarantee that the reserve will open in time, and even if it does in this specific scenario, you would most likely have to deal with a tree landing. You're not out of the woods yet. CYPRES 2 offers the option of increasing the activation altitude up to 9 steps of approximately 100 feet or 30 meters each. The steps are named A1 through A9. The A stands for altitude. A1 indicates approximately a 100-foot increase to the standard activation altitude. A2 indicates approximately a 200-foot increase, and so on. If selected, the A1 through A9 is displayed during the self-test countdown between the 10 and the 0. For example, if A1 is selected, the self-test countdown will be 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, A1, 0. Also, after the self-test is complete, the selected number will blink on the far left location of the display. At altitude, the selected number is visible permanently. The higher the activation altitude, the more likely that a 2 canopy out scenario will occur if your main canopy is deployed too low. The lower the activation altitude, the greater the possibility of your reserve not being fully inflated at a sufficient altitude. Both scenarios can cause injury or death. AirTech recommends for you to plan your main container opening altitude, meaning a fully open, flying, and controllable main canopy a minimum of 1,000 feet above your activation altitude. For example, if your AAD activation altitude is 750 feet AGL, then your minimum functionally open altitude is 1,750 feet AGL. If your CYPRES activation altitude is 850 feet AGL, then your minimum functionally open altitude is 1,850 feet AGL. Opinion incoming. Personally, we feel this is a bit low and flirting with danger unnecessarily. According to the USPA Basic Safety Requirements Minimum Opening Altitudes, a USPA B, C, or D license holder is required to have a decision altitude of no lower than 1,800 feet. That means that the 1,000-foot buffer takes things right to the limit. In addition, this also puts less experienced jumpers at risk who have higher deployment and decision altitude requirements by giving them the idea that it is okay or somehow better to take it low. As a friendly reminder, during the shooting of this video, USPA A license holders are required to have their main parachute deployment no lower than 3,000 feet AGL and a decision altitude of 2,500 feet. It is true that an SNTA may waive the minimum deployment altitude for C and D license holders from 2,500 feet down to 2,000 feet if necessary. But taking into consideration your altitude loss during main canopy deployment, chances are you will not be able to honor your decision altitude. Many more factors come into play as well that need to be considered, such as the type of skydive you are participating in and the opening characteristics of the main canopy. Setting an appropriate decision altitude based on your experience level is a discussion topic for another video. If you decide to select a different activation altitude, you must enter the unit information area by pressing the button down immediately when the 0 has appeared at the end of the self-test, and then keep it pressed down. After it has shown the flight counter, the serial number, and the next possible maintenance date, the unit shows the feet or meter setting. The next information you will see is the current activation altitude setting. After half a second, release the button and immediately press it again. The red LED will turn on. When the LED turns off, immediately release the button. Then you see the sequence A0 through A9 automatically repeated on the display. Click once in your choice of number and the screen will go blank. Next, to make certain that the setting is never changed accidentally, you have to repeat the same procedure once more, confirming the new setting. During the confirmation, if you do anything else other than the identical procedure, your attempt is invalid, and you will have to start over again, performing the procedure 2 times. Once a user-selectable activation altitude has been set on your CYPRES, it remains in effect until another setting is selected. During the self-test, your CYPRES will indicate the setting by displaying it at the appropriate time during the self-test countdown. After the self-test is complete, the selected number will blink on the very left location of the display as long as your CYPRES is on. The procedure takes 80 seconds and cannot be unintentionally executed. The user-selectable activation altitude feature and the drop zone offset feature can be used independently or in combination. If you are unfamiliar with the difference, check out our video on setting DZ offsets. When used in combination, the selected activation altitude setting number blinks on the very left location of the display, and the drop zone offset is shown on the right side of the display when CYPRES is on. After changing settings, switch the unit on and verify the settings within the unit information sequence.